Hi, everyone, and welcome to Beyond the Headlines. I'm Jenny Parker, and I am the Chief Communications Officer at American Promise. And this series is all about taking a look at how unlimited money in politics is changing American elections. As always, I am joined by my colleague, our Chief Program Officer and General Counsel, Brian Boyle. Brian, how are you?
I'm doing great, Jenny. How are you?
Good, good. Thanks so much for doing this again with me.
Yeah.
Today, we are going to talk about an op ed you recently published on Real Clear Politics. It was called The Supreme Court's AI Collision Course. And the article had a little bit to do about AI, but it really had a lot to do with the American tradition of self governance. So, how about if we dive into your op ed and what you're saying about campaign finance and this new technology we were all wrestling with?
Yeah, absolutely. First thing is that I did think it was important when I opened the op ed to try to ground the readers in the reality of what is technologically possible right now. So in the op ed, I kind of give this bit of a nightmare scenario where you're in the final days of like a contested House race in Congress. And then all of a sudden there's a flood of ads, attack ads against one of the candidates. And when you try to dig behind to figure out where these ads and these text messages are coming from, it turns out it's basically all being run by an artificial intelligence agent that maybe was given like a budget and kind of a top line objective of we're for this person and against that person. But otherwise, all of the language, all of the targeting decisions, it's all being driven by a non-human entity. And the point in opening with that was to just say, listen, folks, this isn't actually science fiction. Like this isn't years away, where we've actually got this technology that's capable right now. And I think the key point for sort of our audience is that this technology is advancing faster than the legal frameworks that cover it right now. And so there's a gap, and maybe we need to try to catch up.
So, unlike so many articles we read about AI right now, your op ed pivots very quickly into how this connects to our current campaign finance system. So, talk to us a little bit about how this nightmare scenario with AI connects to how we address money in politics right now.
Yeah. So, the AI technology now exists within a legal framework that's been built up over the past 50 years. And it's the framework that started with Buckley versus Vallejo, which I know we've talked about before, but kind of that first major campaign finance case, all the way up through cases like Bellotti and Citizens United, and even the most recent one that was decided a couple of months ago. Now, people might be wondering, like, well, what does campaign finance law have to do with artificial intelligence? And I would say one of the key pieces is in the concept of who is a speaker, right? So in these campaign finance cases where the court was treating money as speech and then asking, well, who's spending the money? They would often say, well, there's all sorts of speakers. There's parties, there's PACs, political action committees, there's natural persons, human beings, there's corporations, there's unions. All of these different entities, the court collapsed down into the concept of speakers. And then the court said, lawmakers are not allowed to draw lines based on speaker identity. So basically the same rules that might apply to you and me as human beings have to also apply to all these artificial entity speakers. So that logic extends with full force to the new speakers in our world, which are artificial intelligences. And so my basic argument is that unless the Supreme Court takes a back seat and tries to figure out why artificial intelligence should be distinguished from the other cases that it's decided over the past 50 years, well, then if the Supreme Court doesn't do that, we're quickly in a world where the Supreme Court has given all of these rights to artificial intelligence without the American people ever having an opportunity to weigh in.
So this still sounds to the average reader a little bit out there, a little bit like this could be like a decade away. Tell us about how this is actually showing up right now, an AI agent claiming some sort of right.
Yeah. Well, I guess I would say there's two main ways that we can see it right now. The first, and most people have probably already heard about this, is just there is spending by artificial intelligence companies in our elections right now. Now, of course, that's a corporate entity that is choosing to maybe create a super PAC and then spend money in elections. We don't know whether they are leveraging AI technology in terms of the ads and the messages they're generating, but we know that they are already spending money in our elections, and they believe they have a constitutional right to do so. So that's point one, it's happening. The second thing is that we are seeing artificial intelligence companies making the very same First Amendment arguments in litigation right now. So one quick example is that there have been some wrongful death lawsuits being brought where, it's a tragic situation, but maybe a child takes their own life after interacting with a chatbot. Well, the companies that generated that chatbot are claiming First Amendment free speech protection for the outputs of that chatbot. They're saying it's free speech, it should be protected. So they're pressing those legal claims right now in court, and it's not hypothetical.
That's amazing, actually. So when it comes to campaign finance, if we wanted our lawmakers, or if our lawmakers wanted to set up some guardrails around this, who's in charge? Who gets to make the laws about AI spending, AI engagement in politics right now, in the scenario that you've painted out in your op-ed?
Yeah. Well, I guess I want to make 2 points in response to this question. The first is a little bit of a pessimistic point, which is that under the status quo right now, who's in charge? I think ultimately it's the Supreme Court, and it's the decisions the Supreme Court has already made. And I can say more about why that is, but I still think that lawmakers, if there are any lawmakers that are following this conversation and thinking about it, you should try to pass some laws. You should meet with your lawmakers, and you should think about how you want to regulate artificial intelligence in this area, to try to set up some of these test cases. Because I think at the most basic level, if you ask the American people who should be in charge about these types of decisions, almost everybody thinks that the voters should have a say. So I think right now, when we're in this period where things are still sort of getting teased out, state and federal lawmakers should try to pass the laws that they think are suitable to address this. I think they're very likely to encounter legal obstacles in the Supreme Court, but it's important for that to kind of become public on everybody's radar.
So what should we watch as AI continues its rapid development, and how it will intersect with constitutional law?
Yeah. Well, I've already mentioned those wrongful death cases. So I would say keep an eye on cases where you see AI companies making constitutional rights claims in court settings. I think also to take a look at what state legislatures are trying to do when it comes to AI generated political content. There are a lot of state lawmakers who are concerned about the long-term impact of artificial intelligence in their communities and states. And so I wouldn't be surprised if there are attempts to regulate, and then see how quickly courts intervene and either block or strike down those laws. And then I guess the third point is keep watching the money, keep watching how these companies are spending in politics, whether there's transparency around how they're spending in politics. So there's a lot to keep an eye on. And I think the technology will continue to evolve. And so will the constitutional questions that are raised by that technology. And so will the deeper question of who gets to decide those constitutional questions. Is it going to be the judges, or is it going to be the American people?
So based on that, how does this all intersect with the American Promise mission?
Yeah, well, I think it's important. I know we've spent a lot of time today talking about artificial intelligence, so I wouldn't want people to walk away from this thinking that American Promise has an AI-centered mission. So, right, like one thing we're not doing is trying to say, here's the correct policy when it comes to AI. Instead, and you've heard me say this a million times before, our mission revolves around the question of who gets to decide the policy. And so, our amendment, the 4-Hour Freedom Amendment, doesn't prescribe any rules related to artificial intelligence or anything else, but it does say Congress and the states and our lawmakers there get to set the rules on election spending, and to kind of take that authority back from the Supreme Court. And so our perspective on this whole AI specter is that the American people and their lawmakers should really be the ones deciding policy, not unelected judges. And if I could just say one sort of in the weeds thing about our proposed amendment, in the model language of our amendment, we would actually allow lawmakers to distinguish between actual human beings on the one hand and then artificial entities on the other. And it relates to the point I made earlier where the Supreme Court says everybody's a speaker, right? Everybody is a speaker. Well, we think that the American people and their policymakers may have good reasons for treating human beings differently from other entities, whether they be corporations or artificial intelligences. And so that phrase, artificial entities, is included in our amendment to cover the whole range of non-human actors that lawmakers may want to regulate in the context of election spending.
Great. So what's the one key message you'd like a reader of your op-ed to walk away with?
You hit this at the very beginning when we started talking, where you said we talk about self-government. And I would say, yeah, AI is like the latest sort of pressing concern that's on everybody's minds. But really, you put that to one side and we're asking deep questions about what does it mean for a people to be self-governing? What does it mean for a people to be able to decide the rules of the society that they're living in versus, unelected judges? And I think AI is just the current sort of sharpest example of why our ability to impact policy is so important. And the question of who gets to decide these key policy questions, it's going to keep recurring. And we'll probably keep talking about it.
I just think it's so fascinating. I mean, we hear so much about how AI is impacting education and jobs and tech jobs. And I just think what's so interesting to me about this is we are trapped and locked into a current system in which Americans no longer have any say over. And we've got this technology that is really bumping up against those limitations right now and really exposing that rigid system that we have now. And I think the importance for the American people to be able to iterate with their lawmakers and change laws to meet current challenges. And it seems like we just don't have that right now.
Yeah, I mean, you're totally right. I don't think people want AI to happen to us, right? We want to be part of shaping how it contributes to the common good.
I think it's very interesting. And I think the AI issue brings a very fresh light to all of this. Well, Brian, thanks so much for walking us through your op-ed. Thank you so much for writing it. It's so interesting. And thank you, everybody, for joining us for this edition of Beyond the Headlines. To stay up to date on money and politics and the mission of American Promise, please go ahead and hit follow. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Jenny, for having the conversation.
Bye, Brian.
Bye.